to another edition of Let's Talk Genealogy with Desi L. Campbell. I am your host for this evening's show, and I am extremely excited about our guest on this evening. We're going to be talking to the descendants of Joe and Jennie McLean, my fifth great grandparents, out of Cumberland County, North Carolina, presently Harnett County, North Carolina.
Hi, my name is Mahalia Bunch. I currently live in Tyler, Texas. I am the direct lineage of Sophie McNeill.
Hi, I'm Diane Nelson Trotter, and I am in the direct lineage of Dolly Mae McNeill. I live in Fontana, California.
My name is Dina Procaro Hill. I live in American Fork, Utah, and I am a descendant of Jane McNeill, who is the daughter of Sarah and Sherd McNeill.
My name is Alfreda Judd Wilson. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I am a DNA cousin to you guys through my great-great-great-grandmother, Millie Atkins, and I'm actually, 3 of her kids are my great-grandparents.
My name is Bruce Massey. I currently live in Silver Spring, Maryland. I am a direct lineage of Daniel C. McNeill.
All right, well, my name is Desi Campbell, and I live in Spring Lake, North Carolina, and I am a direct connection to this group of young people through Gabriel McNeill. And we are all
DNA
cousins. Yay! Jennie and Joe McLean. Jennie McLean was born in Virginia in about 1785, just 2 years after the end of the Revolutionary War, and most likely in the Chesapeake Bay area, because most of the slaves that were brought over from the west coast of Africa were brought to the Chesapeake Bay area by Virginia. Jennie and her parents and siblings were brought there, and probably some were kept together, some may have been separated. And that's why we're finding matches from other places that we're not quite sure who they are. So there could be other siblings out there that we don't know about. Jennie was sold several times. From the time she was a child, she was sold in the McLean family, and that's why her last name is McLean. And some of her children were in the McNeill families, and that's why they will go by the name of McNeill. Jennie was sold about 1880 and 1820. Nancy Ann McLean sold Jennie to her uncle Archibald McLean. In 1820, Archibald McLean Sr. willed Jennie to his son Peter McLean. Sometime between 1825 and 1835, Peter sold Jennie to his cousin Hugh McCraney Clark. In 1838, Hugh McCraney Clark sold Jennie to his cousin Archibald McLean Jr.
At the age of 15, Jennie met Joe, also a slave, and they had their first child, Sarah McNeill. McNeill, because she later became owned by the McNeill family. In the years to follow, Jennie and Joe had 12 more children, making 13 in all. In 1820, after the birth of their 10th child, Jennie was taken from her husband and some of their children were willed to Peter McLean. Over the years, the children of Jennie and Joe were sold or willed to different families in the Cumberland County area. Little is known about Joe, but we know that he was born around 1783 in North Carolina. Around 1800, he met Jennie, and they began their family together. In the will of Archibald McLean Sr., dated 1820, he gives Joe to his son Alexander. And the deed was dated 1838. Hugh McCraney Clark is selling Jennie and mentions that she is the wife of Joe. So we know Joe would have been with Hugh McCraney Clark at the time. In 1852, Joe is listed as a slave of Hugh McLean, the son of Archibald McLean Sr. Joe McLean lived to be at least 70 years old or older.
So with the help of DNA from the descendants of Jennie and Joe, their children have been identified and their grandchildren have been identified. What a wonderful thing to have brought this family back together after so many years. Some of the grandchildren of Jennie and Joe were sold to other states. It's remarkable that Jennie lived to be about the age of 95 for that time period. It's quite amazing through the Civil War and all the diseases that they had. So they had 13 children. Sarah was born about 1800 and died after 1880 because she's in the 1880 census. She married Sherrod or Sherrard. Little is known about him because he must have either died or been sold to another state. They had Elizabeth or Lizzie McNeill, Diana, Mr. McNeill. We have not found a name for him yet. Tried desperately, but can't find a name. William or Billy McNeill, Jane McNeill, Stephen McNeill, Daniel C. McNeill, Gabriel McNeill, or Bacchus, as he went by, Charles McNeill, Letty McNeill, Hannah McNeill, Dolly McNeill, and Sophie McNeill. Next child of Jennie and Joe is Bet McNeill. She was born about 1805 in Cumberland County, North Carolina, and she died after 1880 in Harnett County. She married, we don't know the first name, but we know the man's last name was Smith, and he would have been born about 1805. Bet McNeill and Mr. Smith had John Smith, Mary Smith, Archibald Smith, Nancy Smith, and Daniel Smith.
All right, I had Celia McNeill, who was born around 1806 in Cumberland County, North Carolina. She died somewhere after 1880 in Wake County, North Carolina. She married Jack McLean, who was born around 1805 in Cumberland County, North Carolina. Celia and Jack had 3 children, Charles McLean, Doc McLean, and Jared McLean. Then we have Judah, or Julia, or Judy McNeill, who was born around 1807 in Cumberland County, North Carolina. She died somewhere after 1900 in Lillington, Harnett County, North Carolina. She married Cyrus McLean, born around 1805. And Judah and Cyrus had 1 child that we can find, and his name was Cyrus as well.
Diana McNeill was born around 1816 in Cumberland County, North Carolina. She died around 1920 in Maxton, Robeson, North Carolina. She married Henry B. McLean, and they had 3 children, Charity, Sandy, Annie. Lizzie McNeill was born around 1809 in Cumberland County, North Carolina, and died. They had 2 children, Josephus and Jane.
Mildred. Her name was actually Mildred, but she went by mostly Millie. She was a McLean and an Atkins. She's easily found as an Atkins more so than a McLean. And that is more likely than not due to her being passed around during slavery. She married George McDougal, and together they had 13 children within a 27-year period. She lived to be over 100 years old. She died on January 14th, 1912. Her children are Andrew, Millie, Kate, Daniel, Mary Liza, William, Phoebe, John Henry, Letty, Mariah Marie, Charles, Betty Annie, and Amanda. And of that group, I come through Andrew, who married a lady named Amy, and they had a daughter named Lucy. And I come through Letty on my maternal side. And that was their granddaughter. What's her name? Mary Ann Clark. She was the daughter of Daniel Hill Clark. Okay. Robert McNeill was born about 1812, and he married Phoebe Williams. Their children were Francis, Amy, Johnson, Benjamin, James, Anna, Mary, John Wesley, and Edmund.
Lucy McLean was born about 1815 in Cumberland County, North Carolina. and she died 1880 in Newton County, Mississippi. She married Richard Rich Chapman, born about 1806 in South Carolina, and he died after 1880 in Newton County, Mississippi. They both had 10 children: Moses Chapman, Frank Chapman, Samuel Chapman, Dave Chapman, Alan Chapman, Hannah Chapman, Serena Chapman, Judah Chapman, Daniel Chapman, and Laniel Link Chapman. Joseph Joe McLean was born about 1816, Cumberland County, North Carolina, and he died before 1900, Harnett County, North Carolina. He married a Rachel McCormick, born 1st of June, 1833, Cumberland County, North Carolina, and she died the 24th of May, 1926, Harnett County, North Carolina. They had about 14 children: Richard McLean, Nancy C. McLean, Betty Ann McLean, Mary R. McLean, Joe Allen McLean, Cornelia McLean, Robert Hugh McLean, Patsy McLean, Abraham Lincoln McLean, Duncan McLean, John McLean, Margaret McLean, Eliza McLean, and France Fanny McLean.
Okay, George McLean, born about 1818 in Cumberland County, North Carolina, died after 1880 in Upper Little River, Harnett County, North Carolina. Married Venus Smith, born about 1814 in Cumberland County, North Carolina, died after 1880 in Little Upper River, Harnett County, North Carolina. Out of them, they had 2 kids, Neptune McLean and Mrs. McLean.
I have
Oh,
Maddie.
we added, okay.
We added another child later.
Yeah, so Neptune, Mrs. McLean, and Maddie.
Martha or Maddie. She went by both. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, we added that one.
James Jim McLean, born about 1819, Cumberland County, North Carolina, died after 1870 in Barbecue, for real? Barbecue, Cumberland, North Carolina. Mary Hannah Bailey, born about 1843, Cumberland County, North Carolina, died after 1870, Barbecue, Cumberland, North Carolina. Okay, James and Hannah. Out of their union, the kids were Joe McLean, George McLean, Sarah McLean, and Mary McLean.
Sharper McNeill was born about 1820, Cumberland County, North Carolina, died before March of 1898, Cumberland County. Married Zilpha Ray, born about 1840, Cumberland County, North Carolina, died after 1880 in Carvers Creek, Cumberland. And their children are Louisa, or she went by Lula or Lou McNeill, and Diana McNeill, Mary or Margaret McNeill, William McNeill, Joseph McNeill, Duncan James McNeill, Fred McNeill, Ella J. McNeill, and Urias Jefferson McNeill. And then Sharper had a child with, haven't found a marriage record, so had a child with Charlotte Walker. And that child is Balaam J. Walker.
Sarah McNeill was born into slavery on the plantation of Nancy Ann McLean Clark around the year of 1800. Sarah was the oldest child born to Jennie and Joe McLean. It must be noted that some of Jennie and Joe's children go by McLean and some go by the name of McNeill. During the time of slavery, the slaves were required to take up the owner's last name. Some slaves would have kept the owner's name while others changed it. That is why you will see the name McLean used and the name McNeill used in different members of the family. Sometime after the birth in 1800, before 1812, Sarah was sold to Neil and Margaret McNeill, who had migrated from Jura, Argyll, Scotland to Cumberland County, the part of the county that later became Harnett County.
In the year 1812, when Sarah was 12 years old, Neil McNeill died, and Sarah was willed to Hector, Mary, Catherine, and Sarah, the son and daughters of Neil. Sarah ended up living with Mary McNeill because in 1841, Mary, who never married and left no posterity, willed Sarah to her sister Catherine, who also did not marry. In 1850, Sarah is living with Catherine McNeill. Catherine McNeill dies around 1859 and leaves no posterity. wills Sarah to her niece, Jeanette McNeill, who also never married. Sometime around 1814, Sarah met Sherrard or Sherd McNeill, and they had their first child, Elizabeth, or Lizzie, or Bet, around 1815. Sarah and Sherrard's children were divided up among Hector, Mary, Catherine, and Sarah, the 4 siblings, and some were sold off to other people. Sarah's daughter, Miss McNeill, her first name was not known when we started this, is Jane, was sold to a neighbor, William Holder. In 1841, Sarah has 4 of her children living with her. They were Charles, Bet, Elizabeth, Lizzie, Letty, and Will. Sarah and Sherrard had 13 children that have been found after many hours of research and the help of DNA. Unfortunately, no records have been found of Sherrard or Sherd. He may have been sold to another state or may have died. Some of his descendants carry on the name of Sherd.
1865, the Civil War ends and the slaves were finally free. No trace of Sarah is found in the 1870 census, but some of her children were found. We see again Sarah in the 1880 census. Sarah is 80 years old, living with her son, Charles McNeill, and his family in the Upper Little River area of Harnett County, North Carolina. Sarah was at least 80 years old or older when she died. Sarah and Sherrard and their children would have spent their lives working in the production of turpentine in the Harnett County, North Carolina, Harnett County and Cumberland County area of North Carolina. One can only imagine the suffering of being enslaved and having to endure the hardships of that life. We are proud that our progenitors were such strong and resilient people that we were able to rise above the terrible hardships they had to endure. We as their grandchildren, can be grateful to have inherited this wonderful trait. Elizabeth, Lizzie, or Bet McNeill was born around 1850 in Cumberland County, North Carolina. She died in 1909 in Barbecue, Harnett County, North Carolina. She married Daniel J. Harrington, who was born around 1835 in Cumberland County, North Carolina, and died before 1880 in Moore County, North Carolina. Their children are Mariah, Jack, Africa, Emery, Orrin, Molly, Winnie, Chloe, Irvin, William James, Patsy, Viney, Daniel J., and Sherd A. Harrington.
Okay, Mr. McNeill, again, we don't know his name. He was born about 1816 in Cumberland County, North Carolina, died after 1857 in Harnett County. He married Mariah, born about 1816 in Cumberland County, and died 23rd of June, 1914 in McNeill's Ferry Plantation, Harnett, North Carolina. Mariah, and Mr. McNeill had Warren, Israel, Sophronia, Stokes, Clinton, Pink, Kitty Eliza, Green, Thomas, Gaston, Annie, Ned, and Mac. And this family has a piece of paper called a reparation that lists them on it, which is very interesting. It's a very rare thing to have because they were slaves of the wife of Archibald Stewart McNeill. And she was talking about giving them their freedom. Correct, Desi?
Yes, before 1865.
Yeah, before the Civil War ended. So that's quite an interesting piece of history to have.
Diana McNeill was born around 1816 in Cumberland County, North Carolina, and died around 1920 in Maxton, Robeson, North Carolina. She married Henry B. McLean, and they had 3 children, Charity, Sandy, and Annie.
William, also known as Billy McNeill, was born about 1818 in Cumberland County, North Carolina, and he died before 1880 in Harnett County, North Carolina. He married a lady named Amy, and together they had several children. Their children were Mary, Luke, Harrison, Betsy, Letty, William, Jeffrey, Eliza, John, and Gabriel.
Jane McNeill Holder was, had a child with someone, we don't know who it is, had a daughter, Caroline, and then she had a son, Nelson Holder Ritchie. That's kind of unusual because his name is not McNeill, but the story is, and what we found through DNA and many hours of research, Nelson is my third great grandfather, and his life was always a mystery. He never even told his children about his past. Well, come to find out that his mother was Jane McNeill, the daughter of Sheridan Sarah. She was a slave of William Holder. William Holder's nephew, Wiley Holder, came over one day to visit, and Jane got pregnant. And the neighbor, Neil McNeill, was moving to Missouri, so the Holders sold Jane and sent her on her way with Neil McNeill to Lawrence County, Missouri. As soon as she arrived in Missouri, she gave birth to Nelson Holder Ritchie, and she died shortly thereafter. So my third great grandfather, Nelson Holder Ritchie, grew up in Lawrence County, Missouri, and when he was 15 years old, he ran away, and he ran over the border to Kansas, to Topeka, Kansas, where he met up with an abolitionist by the name of John Ritchie, Colonel John Ritchie. So Colonel John Ritchie gave my grandpa a job in his lime quarry, and there he earned enough money to move to Great Bend, Kansas, where he bought a hotel, a livery stable. He owned a hack and dray business and an omnibus business, which is he would transport passengers from the train station into town, into his hotel. And there he lived for 20 years. So his name is Nelson Holder because he was owned by the Holders, and Ritchie, he took on the last name of Ritchie out of respect for Colonel John Ritchie. He turned over his businesses to a man he thought would help him, but that man ended up taking him for everything he owned. So grandfather was penniless and didn't know quite what to do, and so he had married a white woman named Annie Cowan Russell, and she was from Pennsylvania, and she had family in Utah. So she said, let's move to Utah. So they ended up in Bountiful, Utah, and that's why I'm here today. Most of his descendants still live here. So that is his story. Nelson Holder Ritchie married Annie Cowan Russell. They had Olive Ellen Ritchie. She married William Cleverly, and they had my great-grandma, Mary Louisa Cleverly, who married Elmer Day, and they had Lillian Day, who married Roy Stonebreaker, and they had my mother, Jean Stonebreaker, who married Robert Percaro, and had me, Dina Percaro Hill, and I married Gary Hill. That's my line.
Okay, Stephen McNeill was born on or about 1823 in Cumberland County, North Carolina, and died after 1871 in the township of Stewart's Creek, which is in Harnett County, North Carolina. He married a lady named Charlotte. Together they had sons Will, Ben, John, Daniel, Stephen, Charlie, Hector, and Archie, and a daughter, Annie, and Sarah. Daughters Annie and Sarah.
Daniel C. McNeill, born in 1824, Cumberland County, North Carolina, died after 1880, Hope County, North Carolina. Married to Nancy McFatter, born 15th of June, 1825, North Carolina, died 1899, Hope County, North Carolina. Out of that union, they had children, Duncan, Agnes, Nisi, and one adopted daughter, Mahala.
Daniel C. had Angus. Angus married Mary McLean, and they had Pinky Henry and Etta McNeill, and Pinky Henrietta married William Polk Ferguson.
So I have Gabriel McNeill Backus. He was born around 1825 in Cumberland County, North Carolina, and he died after 1900 in Pensacola, Escambia, Florida. His first wife was Caroline McLean, born around 1827 in Cumberland County, North Carolina, and she died after 1870 in Harnett County, North Carolina. His second wife was Mariah, born in 1852 in Alabama, and she died in 1855 in Pensacola, Escambia, Florida. Gabriel and Caroline had Penny Jane, Sherd, Mary Catherine, Cherry, Hepsy Amanda, John J., Sylvia, William B., Nancy, Hugh, and Julia. His second wife was Josephine Shackelford. The second wife, Josephine Shackelford, they had Carrie, Susie, Mary, Lily Mae, and Louis Backus. I am a descendant of Gabriel McNeill. Gabriel had a daughter named Hepsy Amanda McNeill, who married Louis McLean. They had a daughter named Mary Jane McLean, who married Turner Campbell. From Turner and Mary Jane came Jim Campbell, which is my grandfather, who married Donna Jane McNeill, and y'all figure that one out. We had Ernest Lee Campbell, who married Dorothy Wells, and I come from Dorothy and Ernest. One interesting thing I want to say about Gabriel is we never was able to find Gabriel in the 1870 or the 1880 census with his wife Caroline. We only knew his name because on all his children's death certificate, it lists him as the father. But it was about 3 or 4 years ago that we found a DNA match that had Gabriel, but his name was Backus. So we're not sure where he got the last name Backus from, but he was in Florida, and it said that he was from, one census said he was from South Carolina, another one said he was from Alabama.
Charles McNeill was born about 1826 in Cumberland County, North Carolina. He died before 1900, Harnett County, North Carolina. Married Jennie McCoy, born 1838, Cumberland County, North Carolina. She died 25th of December, 1917 in Upper Little River, Harnett County, North Carolina. They had about 13 children. Amy McNeill, Charles McNeill, Sarah Ann McNeill, Millie Jane McNeill, Sophia E. McNeill, Ben W. McNeill, Mary McNeill, John T. McNeill, Sherd McNeill, Annie Jane McNeill, Neil A. McNeill, Flora E. McNeill, and Desi Ann McNeill.
Lady McNeill, born about 1827, Cumberland County, North Carolina, died after 1900, innocent, unknown father, and it had Matilda McLean. But out of that union, they had 13 children, starting with John McLean, William McLean, Louis McLean, Betsy McLean, John McLean, Isaac McLean, that's my middle name, Amy McLean, Sherrod or Cheryl McLean, Mary McLean, Neil McLean, Duncan James McLean, and Charles Frederick McLean.
Hannah McNeill was born in 1832 in Cumberland County, North Carolina, and died after 1867 in Buckhorn, Harnett County, North Carolina. She married Isaac Cofield, born around 1817 in North Carolina, and died after 1870 in Buckhorn, Harnett County, North Carolina. Hannah and Isaac had 3 children, Hannah, Kate, and Major H.
Dolly Mae McNeill was born around June 1835 in Harnett County, North Carolina, and died August 9, 1918 in Pulaski County, Arkansas. She married John Nelson and had Jane Jennie, Henry Benjamin, Neil A., Mary, Johnny Lemon, Melinda, Rosie, Caroline, all were Nelsons. Dolly McNeill is my great-grandmother, and I never knew that name until I took the DNA test and got with Desi, and I guess that was a big find for us all. But she married, like I said, John Nelson. He was a Methodist minister. He was a free person of color born in Virginia, but it shows that his parents were from North Carolina. So I don't have any information on them. And I was wondering when Dina talked about Nelson Holder Ritchie, I'm wondering if that may be something to check out, that first name Nelson. Maybe it meant something more than what we
Yeah.
know. So I want to
Interesting.
talk to you about that.
Yeah.
Okay. And so they were in Pulaski County, Arkansas. And so I do have the death certificate for her. I don't have anything on him, but that's my Dolly.
All right.
Yes,
I have
ma'am.
the baby of the siblings, Sophie McNeill. She was born about 1840, Cumberland County, North Carolina, and died after 1880, Sand Hills, Moore, North Carolina. She married Americus Austin, born about 1822, North Carolina, and he died about the 8th of August, 1928, Adore, Moore, North Carolina. So Sophie and Americus only had 3 girls, Patsy, Julia, and Emma. So Patsy married an Albert Muse, and on the 3rd of April, 1893, they had a boy named Alexander Muse. They had 9 children, but I'm mentioning Alexander Muse because he's my direct lineage. And Alexander Muse had a son by the name of Milton Bunch, and on February 14, 1940. I cannot say it was with his wife, but it was with a woman named Ella Bunch. And Milton had 7 children, and he had me, his youngest, in 1989. And that's how I come through Sophie.
Well, that's going to do it for tonight's show, ladies and gentlemen. Join us next week, same time, same place, as we talk with my DNA cousins, Brian Hayes out of Chicago, Illinois, and Don Wright out of Buckatona, Mississippi, as we talk about the migration between Harnett County, North Carolina, Alabama, and Mississippi in the early 1850s to 1870s.